Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me for chapter two. We'll breeze a little bit more through this one. I want to hit more of the high points to get you, more and more of that overview of international business. So let me share the screen. Okay, and okay, so when we talk about international trade, let's consider the volume of what's done. So, all global exports, at least as of 2010, exceeded $18.9 trillion. That is just an unfathomable number to consider. And the dollar volume of world exports is greater than the GNP of every nation in the world except the US. And that's mind blowing as well, that if you took all the countries in the world, put their dollar volume of exports together, the gross national product of what the US cranks out is still greater. 1/4 of everything made or grown worldwide is exported. So just think of it this way. Um, 1 out of every 4 things is exported. Um, 1 out of 4 things in the U.S. is exported to another country. 1 out of 4 things in other countries is exported to another country. 1 out of every 4 things. So only 3 things for every 3 things that are produced in the United States. Um, those 3 things are staying here, and one is going to a different country. And 70% of exports from developed nations go to other industrialized nations, not developing countries. So in the US, if we're exporting something in the US, typically it's not going to a developing or third world country like um, China or India. It's actually going to other developed countries like Canada, Great Britain, Germany, Spain. It's going to these countries, not third world countries. And the countries I just listed are considered developed countries. Okay, so small and medium-sized businesses as exporters account for nearly 98% of account for nearly 90% of all U.S. exporters and 33% of the total value of American exports. So total export revenues of small and medium-sized enterprises was $308 billion in 2009. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement countries, Mexico and Canada, account for over 25% of small and medium-sized enterprise merchandise exports, which is about 90.5 billion. So I know that you just found those as fun, riveting facts. So export destinations, so manufactured goods to developing nations for raw materials and to other industrialized nations. However, regional trade agreements may shift the direction. So if you look at your right-hand slide, ASEAN and Southeast Asia, Mercosur in South America, EU in Europe, NAFTA in North America, may not necessarily mean that when you think about manufactured goods, compared to what I just said, but regional does have a play in where those products go. So the relevance of major trading partners to management, favorable business climate in importing nation. Is it a good environment to do business if I'm going to import something there? Export and import regulations are workable. Does that mean I have to pay huge bribes? Does it mean that I have to do ridiculous amounts of paperwork in order to get my product imported or exported? It's a great question. No cultural objections to buying that nation's goods. Again, let's think about the example of India and selling packaged meat to Hindus and Buddhists. Satisfactory transportation facilities exist. It's expensive to ship. It's simply expensive to ship products. We don't think about that too much in the age of Amazon, but typically we don't buy ginormous things when we purchase from Amazon. So, and with that said, not trying to just focus on the cost of shipping, but cost of shipping goes up comparison to distance and ease of travel. So if you've got a mountainous area, and so I mentioned Nicaragua in the last lecture, but if you think of a country like Nicaragua, coffee is a little bit more expensive because it costs more money to get the coffee outside of the mountains. Like you have to drive through mountains and work your way through mountains to get to ports of entry. So it can cost more. It can be difficult to ship products. Experienced import channel members such as merchants, banks, and custom brokers. Is the infrastructure for business already there? If you don't have good banks to deal with, if you don't have pre-existing merchants to sell your merchandise, or you don't have customs brokers, it can be very difficult penetrating the market of a foreign country. Available foreign exchange. Can you trade your currency with that currency? And government pressure on importers to buy from countries that are established customers. Government pressure on importers to buy from countries that are established customers. So if we talk about international trade theory, we can think of something like mercantilism. Now, anytime you hear ism, that's a philosophy. So think of it that way. It's not necessarily a method of doing things, but it's a philosophy. So the philosophy of mercantile or mercantilism and economic philosophy, two things: a nation's wealth depends on accumulated treasure, usually gold. So gold historically has been the driving factor of how wealthy a country is. And to increase wealth, government policy should promote exports and discourage imports, just like the Trump agenda. Guys like Adam Smith, who wrote about the free hand of capitalism, said you shouldn't you shouldn't ascribe to mercantilism as a philosophy. There should simply be free trade. Government shouldn't have too much interference in capitalism. Okay, we're going to skip these things and save them for a later date. So just to give you something terrifying to wait for. Exchange rates. So exchange rate fluctuations shift the demand and flow of goods and services between countries. So if I'm trading with a country like Korea, it may be cheaper for me to export something from Korea or to buy something from Korea and have it shipped one day than maybe the next day, because maybe the value of their currency goes down and I can buy more for less of my currency. And so we see that from time to time. You also see people who trade in foreign exchange. They watch these markets in order to make money on the value of different currencies. I used to trade currency. And so I traded a lot of Japanese yen or yun. I think it's called yun. No, it's yen, Japanese yen. And, I would buy yen when it wasn't when it had a lower value. And then I would sell yen after it increased in value. And so there are definitely ways to play the markets with this. Countries keep or regain competitive position through currency devaluation, which is something that Donald Trump has accused China of. I think he believes that China's currency is actually more valuable or should trade at higher rates than it does. And he has accused them of currency manipulation a lot. He's kind of backed off of that in the last couple of weeks. But those are things that countries may do in order to keep or regain their competitive advantage. Newer explanations for the direction of trade, differences in resource endowments, overlapping demand, international product life cycle, economies of scale and experience curve, national competitive advantage from regional clusters. So, some countries have abundant resources when compared to other countries. We'll get into that a little bit more with a subsequent lecture. Overlapping demand, consumers in several countries demand the same goods or services because customers' taste and market demand are affected by a nation's per capita income. So if you live in a developed world like America, Great Britain, um, Germany, you are going to see demand for more expensive goods and similar demand. So right now, if you look at home decor decorations, what's all the rage right now? Well, one thing that's all the rage is what we call modern decorating, or sleek, clean. Um, the way that dressing, or whether we say dressing modern or decorating our home in a modern style. Well, we don't see that just here in the U.S. We also see it in Great Britain. We see it in Germany, and people can afford to pay for those things. Therefore, goods are exported to countries with similar levels of per capita income and market demand for comparable products. So there's an international product lifestyle. It's four-stage. U.S. exports, foreign production begins, foreign competition in export markets, import competition in the U.S. So the U.S., maybe you're a company here in the U.S. and you make a widget that you want sold in a foreign market. And let's just say it's a cell phone for argument. So you create a cell phone that's low cost, and you sell it in India. Well, after a while of that product being in India, a foreign producer may begin producing that product. And then the foreign competition is in your export market. But eventually what may end up happening is the reverse, is where that foreign producer imports their phone into the United States. Here's an international product lifestyle curve, just how that it affects us. Most industries benefit from economies of scale. So as plants get larger and output increases, average unit cost of production decreases. If you can produce more, typically it will cost less. So for a summary of international trade theory, international trade occurs because there are relative price differences among nations. And differences stem from differences in production costs, which result in differences in endowments of the factors of production, differences in levels of technology that determine the factor intensities used, and differences in efficiencies with which factor intensities are used, and foreign exchange rates. So those four things summarize your international trade theory. Direct investment is really what I want to focus on. And this is investment to participate in management and ownership of the firm, in addition to the return on investment. I'm sure that's a term that you're already familiar, return on investment. If I put X amount of dollars in, how long till I see a return on my investment? But with this idea of a direct investment, somebody's directly investing into the company, and so maybe it's an investor from the outside, and they want some level of ownership or control or return on investment for their investment. Let's see. Okay, just real quick, what I want to say here is U.S. corporate your motivation to buy existing foreign companies can be listed here. So maybe the U.S. is restructuring, and there's sellable U.S. assets. Foreigners want rapid access to U.S. advanced technology, easier U.S. market success with established U.S. brands, increasing global competition, restructuring, and consolidation. So a great example is a few years ago, A Japanese investment firm purchased Budweiser. It was cheaper to purchase Budweiser in all of its intellectual property and its presence and its history here in the United States. It was cheaper for them, for the Japanese, to buy a beer company here in the U.S. than to come to the U.S. and start a beer company. So those are some reasons why. Let's see. I'm just flipping through here, guys, trying to focus on the more important things. We'll get into a little bit of this later. But a question is, does foreign direct investment lead to trade? Yes, it does. And it can have some profound effects. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to close this, bring it back. I'm going to stop mirroring right now. And yeah, so that's it for chapter 2. There's just other things in there that's just easier to get into as we get into subsequent chapters, but I hope that was helpful.